Hello, this video is how to prevent influencer fraud. Now, let's look at the causes of influencer fraud. The chief cause being fake followers. So, where an advertiser believes that they are going to reach 1 million people or whatever the audience or following an influencer has, when really some of, or maybe even the majority of those followers are actually fake robots. Fake engagement is a similar thing where bots, again, will like and post comments on posts that an influencer may put up, and these may inflate the engagement metrics on a post that an advertiser has paid for. There's questions around what is valuable, so there isn't really some sort of standardized model on what it should cost to work with an influencer that has 1 million followers or 500,000 followers or 50,000 followers. So it's very much open to whatever the influencer can command or negotiate with the advertiser, which again, if they are commanding thousands of pounds or dollars for posts and there are fake followers and fake engagement involved, then that's problematic for an advertiser. You also have advertisers that could be paying over the odds. So one advertiser may pay £1,000 for a post from an influencer with 100,000 followers. Another may pay £2,000 for a post from an influencer with 50,000 followers. There's definitely a sense from advertisers, sort of a scramble to get into influencer marketing, and because of how it's done well for particular brands, I believe that fear of missing out means money is just being gushing into influencer marketing, and perhaps there hasn't been as much due diligence as there should have been. And lastly, very much a quick win mentality, whereby there's sort of this belief that if an advertiser pays an influencer with a large following to do a post, then that will cause a spike in likes or engagements or sales or whatever it may be. My belief is it's very much the case that influencer marketing is a marathon and not a race, and that paying for short-term, even single posts or even short-term activations isn't the way to go. It's actually something that needs a longer-term view and approach. And that type of approach naturally mitigates against fraud. So, on to the challenges. So, why are we where we are? Well, as I've touched on with the lack of standardized pricing, it's very much a wild, wild west out there with different influencers, agencies, or other platforms just basically charging sort of whatever they want for exposure or to work with influencers. And there isn't really a sense of organization out there. It's quite chaotic and it can be quite hard for advertisers to navigate. And that kind of environment naturally is fertile ground for fraud. There are barriers. If an advertiser can talk to an agency or an agent, they don't have direct contact with influencers, then it may be difficult to determine or ascertain what the value of that influencer may be. All they'll get is a picture of them with some key metrics. Very often it's the personality of the influencer that matters, their beliefs, their ethics, how well their character lends itself to a brand, as opposed to they just have a lot of followers or they get a lot of likes. And again, this working with influencers directly, which sort of lends itself to a longer term approach, is becoming harder and harder to do. Now, influencers are being barriered or sort of locked behind these gates by these various bodies and organizations. There's a whole anti-fraud industry that's sprung up. So influencer fraud tools and metrics and whatnot. Now, the fact that there's an anti-fraud industry just tells you that something's very, very wrong with the state of influencer marketing, and also the fact that advertisers have to pay for often a separate solution in order to conduct influencer fraud. There are issues with opaque audiences, and again, going back to fake followers and fake engagement, it's very difficult from the outside for an advertiser to determine the value of an influencer's audience or how well they'll lend themselves and how receptive they'll be to their brand. And lastly, as I've explained in these 4 factors here, it's very costly and time intensive in order for an advertiser and their team to navigate all of this. So then, what is the solution? Now, I touched on this in another video where I explained about a paid on results model for influencer marketing. And I believe that one solution, it's not the absolute solution, but definitely one solution to influencer fraud would be the implementation of a paid on results model. Now, all paid on results means is that the influencer will be paid when a tangible action, such as a sale conversion, occurs. So, in a nutshell, rather than an advertiser paying £10,000 up front for 3 posts and a blog or maybe a YouTube video, the advertiser doesn't pay anything. They only pay something when the influencer has helped them generate a sale or helped the audience take some sort of desirable action for the advertiser. So immediately, there's only payment on a value exchange. Now, there may be arguments to say, if you want to go down the more brand awareness route, that paying upfront for a post is fine if you just want to generate exposure. And if advertisers want to do that, fine, they can do. But for advertisers that want to be able to quantify what their budget and investment is doing, then the paid on results model makes a lot of sense because it will do just that. Now, I'll quickly run through some points around the model and why it's beneficial. The chief point being that fraud's dependent on advance payment, which now doesn't happen. So even if an advertiser works with a fraudulent influencer, that influencer is not going to get anything. The fake followers and the fake engagement that they have aren't really a factor anymore. They will only receive something if a genuine transaction has occurred. So it mitigates one of the easiest ways advertisers fall prey to fraud with influencers. Influencer value can be quantified in sales converted. So immediately the value of influencers can be understood on a profit and loss level. And certainly if an advertiser can get influencer marketing to break even or even start generating a profit for them, then all of a sudden it becomes a very sensible and lucrative channel to invest in. And it can also be evidenced because paid on results model is trackable. Any agency or agent fees are now tied to performance. There's less of a need for fraud detection services and any associated fees, so there are savings there. Again, audiences are easier to quantify in terms of value. So an advertiser could pay to work with 5 influencers on paid on results and suddenly find out that only one of them is really converting. So then they could effectively either work with the other 4 on a different basis or not at all. And maybe then they want to start paying in advance or sending samples or whatever it may be to the converting influencer and scaling with that influencer, as opposed to having to split budget between 4 other influencers that weren't converting. They can now concentrate budget on what's working. Again, investment's now tied to performance, so it's very low risk. This model is very accessible for brands of any size and budget to do. And it's just a sensible way of creating an accountable influencer market. As I mentioned, it's very fragmented and chaotic at the moment. The more prevalent this model becomes, is the more accountability it brings into influencer marketing. So if you agree or you want to talk more about this, keen to get your thoughts, my email's there. I also explain more about the paid on results model in my book, which you can find on Amazon, The Advertiser's Guide to Affiliate Marketing. And lastly, please like, subscribe, share, leave a comment below, and thank you for watching.